For 60 long years, Grandma Evelyn kept a secret deeply buried behind her gentle smile and the comforting scent of her famous cinnamon apple pies. But on her very last day on this earth, surrounded by weeping family members in a quiet, sterile hospital room, she pulled her youngest granddaughter close. With her final fading breath, she whispered 3 words that made absolutely no sense to anyone. She whispered, "Open the blue." And then she was gone. If you enjoy stories that warm the heart and leave you with a valuable lesson, subscribe to Nanny Granny's Golden Tales and become part of our storytelling family. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love reading every comment. The rain poured down relentlessly on the day we laid Grandma Evelyn to rest. It felt as though the sky itself was mourning the loss of the kindest soul in the small, quiet town of Oakhaven. Evelyn was the undeniable anchor of the Montgomery family. She was a woman whose hands were always dusted with flour, whose eyes held the twinkling wisdom of 1,000 lived experiences, and whose heavy oak door was never locked to a neighbor in need. But to her granddaughter, Clara, she was more than just a grandmother. She was a confidant, a safe harbor in a world that often felt far too stormy to navigate. Clara was 24, and she felt entirely lost. She had recently abandoned her lifelong dream of becoming a writer, crushed by a relentless series of harsh rejections that left her creative spirit bruised and her confidence completely shattered. She had packed up her small city apartment and moved back to Oakhaven to regroup, and it was Evelyn who spent the last 6 months quietly mending Clara's broken wings with hot tea and silent embraces. Now, sitting in the dimly lit parlor of her grandmother's old Victorian house, Clara could not stop thinking about those final 3 words. Open the blue. What could it possibly mean? The family had gathered after the exhausting funeral to discuss the estate, their voices a low murmur over the clinking of porcelain teacups. Her mother, Sarah, looked utterly depleted, her eyes red-rimmed from days of crying. Aunt Martha, the fiercely practical one, was already sifting through a thick stack of financial paperwork with a businesslike efficiency. Uncle Thomas sat quietly in the corner armchair, lost in his memories. No one seemed to care about Evelyn's dying words except Clara. To the rest, it was just the tragic consequence of a failing mind. "Mom," whispered Clara, leaning across the worn mahogany coffee table, "what do you think she meant? Open the blue. Did Grandma have a blue safe? A blue diary hidden away somewhere?" Sarah sighed heavily, rubbing her temples. "Oh, Clara, sweetheart. The doctors told us to expect this. Her mind was wandering at the end. Heavy medication, lack of oxygen. People say strange things when they cross over. It was just delirium. You need to let it go." But Clara shook her head gently. "No, you weren't standing as close as I was. You didn't look directly into her eyes. Her gaze was perfectly clear. She squeezed my hand with desperate strength. She wanted me to find something she left behind." Aunt Martha looked up, adjusting her silver reading glasses. "Clara, dear, we have a mountain of tasks to get through. This house is massive, incredibly old, and falling apart. We need to clear it out, assess structural repairs, and put it on the real estate market by the end of the month. We do not have the time to go chasing the fever dreams of a dying woman." The harshness of Martha's words stung deeply, but Clara knew her aunt was dealing with grief by organizing chaos. Still, the thought of selling the house, of strangers walking carelessly across the creaky hardwood floors that held so much history, made a knot form in Clara's throat. Every scratch on the floorboards told a story. "Give me 1 week," Clara said, her voice trembling slightly but firm. "Let me stay here alone for 1 week to sort through her things. If I do not find anything related to the color blue, I will help you pack up the rest of this house without another complaint." Sarah and Martha exchanged a long, hesitant look before Sarah finally nodded. "1 week, Clara. But please, do not drive yourself crazy looking for meaning where there is only silence." The very next morning, Clara began her exhaustive search. The house felt unnervingly quiet without the comforting sounds of Evelyn humming old church hymns. Clara started in the master bedroom. She went methodically through every single drawer of the antique dresser, every shelf of the dark cedar closet, and every battered shoebox filled with faded photographs. She looked desperately for anything blue that might hold a secret. She found a pale blue silk scarf, navy blue knitting needles, and a dusty glass jar filled with blue sewing buttons. But none felt like a grand secret worthy of a final desperate breath. By the afternoon of the 3rd day, heavy exhaustion set in. Clara sat cross-legged on the rough floorboards of the dimly lit attic, surrounded by mothball-scented trunks. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of sunlight. She felt a profound sense of failure. Maybe her mother was right. Maybe it was just meaningless rambling. Clara reached out and picked up an old black-and-white photograph of Evelyn as a very young woman. She was standing proudly in front of this very Victorian house, her smile radiant and full of hope. Clara traced her grandmother's youthful face. "What did you mean, Grandma?" she whispered softly into the stagnant air. "Please, give me a sign to keep going." Just then, a loud, sharp knock echoed from the heavy oak front door downstairs. Clara quickly scrambled to her feet, wiped the dust from her jeans, and hurried down the stairs. When she opened the heavy door, she found Mr. Abernathy standing patiently. He was the town's oldest living resident, a retired clockmaker who had known Evelyn since they were children. "Hello there, Clara," the old man said, removing his weathered tweed cap. His eyes were incredibly kind and perceptive. "I came to pay my respects. Your grandmother was a truly remarkable woman. The finest, most generous soul this town ever knew." "Thank you, Mr. Abernathy," Clara said, stepping aside. "Please come in. Can I offer you a cup of hot tea? There is still some of her favorite chamomile left." "I would love nothing more," he replied, leaning heavily on his carved wooden cane. He stopped directly in front of the magnificent, towering grandfather clock in the corner of the room. It was an absolute masterpiece of dark mahogany wood, but it had completely stopped ticking many years ago. Evelyn always stubbornly refused to have it fixed, claiming she liked the peaceful silence. As Clara handed Mr. Abernathy a steaming teacup, a bold thought struck her. "Mr. Abernathy, you knew my grandmother better than almost anyone. On the day she passed, she told me to open the blue. Does that mean anything to you? Did she own something secretive that was blue?" The old clockmaker instantly froze, his teacup halting halfway to his lips. He slowly lowered the cup back to its saucer, the porcelain clinking sharply. He looked at Clara for a long time, his mind racing back through decades of buried history. "Open the blue," he murmured, his voice a raspy whisper. "I have not heard anyone make reference to the blue in nearly 50 long years." Clara's heart began to hammer violently. "So it is real. What is it, Mr. Abernathy? Where is it hidden?" Mr. Abernathy let out a long, shuddering sigh. "Clara, my dear, your grandmother was a woman of immense sacrifice. Long before you were born, Evelyn had a beautiful, wild dream. She was a brilliantly talented artist. She painted canvases with a fiery passion and had been formally accepted into a highly prestigious art academy in Paris. It was her golden ticket out of Oakhaven." Clara frowned deeply, trying to reconcile this image of a bohemian artist with the flower-dusted grandmother she knew. "I never knew she painted. I have never seen a single canvas anywhere." "That is because she willingly gave it all up," Mr. Abernathy explained softly. "Her father fell terribly ill just weeks before she was supposed to leave for France. The medical bills were astronomical. They were going to lose this beloved family house to the bank. Evelyn took her hard-earned Parisian tuition money, paid off the bank debt, and stayed right here to nurse her dying father. She firmly locked her vibrant dreams away in the dark." If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a moment to like the video. It helps these stories reach more people who need a little inspiration today. Clara felt hot tears prickling her eyes. She sacrificed her bright future just for this old house, for our family. "Yes, she did," Mr. Abernathy nodded. "But she could not ever bring herself to destroy her actual art. She painted one final masterpiece, pouring her aching soul into the canvas. She titled it The Blue. It was a breathtaking, violent seascape, perfectly capturing a dark storm rolling in over a turbulent ocean. It was a raw reflection of her internal storm. When she decided to stay here forever, she carefully hid the painting away. She told me that looking at it daily was too painful, but destroying it would be like killing a living part of her own spirit." Clara suddenly jumped to her feet. "She hid the painting. That is what she meant. But where could it possibly be? I have meticulously searched every inch of this entire house." A gentle smile spread across Mr. Abernathy's weathered face. He pushed himself up from his armchair and walked slowly over to the grand, silent grandfather clock. He lovingly ran his gnarled fingers over the polished mahogany. "Your grandmother was an incredibly clever woman, Clara. She knew people rarely bother to look past the obvious surface. Tell me, why do you think she never allowed me, a professional clockmaker, to fix this broken clock?" Clara stared intently at the silent timepiece. "She always told us she liked the quiet." "Evelyn never actually liked silence," the old man chuckled softly. "She loved the chaotic sound of life. She stopped this clock intentionally. Look very closely at the brass hands." Clara stepped closer. The ornate brass hands were forever permanently frozen at exactly 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock, Clara read aloud. "What does that time mean?" "It means it is finally time to look much deeper," Mr. Abernathy said with a twinkle in his eye. "When we were young children playing hide-and-seek, Evelyn and I used to hide our secret treasures in the large hollow space directly behind the wooden clock face. To open the secret latch, you have to physically turn the minute hand backward, fighting against the natural flow of time. You must turn it back exactly 3 full hours." Clara's hands were trembling with anticipation as she unlatched the glass door. She tentatively grasped the cold metal minute hand. It resisted at first, incredibly stiff with decades of disuse, but with a firm push, It gave way with a loud mechanical click. She slowly turned it backward. 1 hour passed. 2 hours passed. 3 full hours. The exact moment the heavy brass hand reached 12, a soft mechanical clack echoed from deep within the hollow wooden belly of the clock. A cleverly hidden wooden panel at the back of the interior compartment popped open just a fraction of an inch. Clara audibly gasped. She reached her shaking hand inside the dark cavity, and her fingertips brushed against something large wrapped tightly in thick canvas. With utmost care, she slowly pulled the object out into the light. It was a large, flat package bound tightly with dry twine. "Go on, open it," Mr. Abernathy urged gently from behind her. Clara placed the heavy package flat on the coffee table. She carefully snipped the old twine. As she slowly folded back the protective canvas, a rush of stale air met her nose, carrying the distinct scent of aged oil paint. Finally, she completely uncovered the hidden canvas. It was unimaginably breathtaking. The thick oil colors were incredibly vibrant and untouched by the fading rays of the sun. It was a masterful painting of a violent, stormy ocean, the towering waves a tumultuous blend of deep indigo, rich sapphire, and striking cerulean blue. The sky was heavy and brooding, but dramatically breaking through the dark clouds was a single piercing ray of golden sunlight. It was an undeniable masterpiece of raw emotion and staggering natural talent. But as Clara stared deeply into the painted storm, a hot tear slipped down her cheek. "It is incredibly beautiful. But why did she want me to find it now? Just to see what she threw away? To show me the magnitude of her sacrifice?" "Look closely at the back of the wooden canvas, Clara," Mr. Abernathy suggested softly. Clara carefully lifted the heavy painting and turned the wooden frame over. Firmly attached to the back of the canvas was a thick, pale blue paper envelope. Across the front, written elegantly in her grandmother's familiar cursive, was a single word: Clara. Clara's breath hitched painfully. Her hands shook violently as she opened the blue envelope. Inside was a neatly folded letter. She carefully unfolded the delicate pages and began to read aloud, her voice trembling. "My dearest, darling Clara, if you are reading these written words, it means that I am finally gone from this world, and you have finally found the courage to look past the surface of things. I am leaving this hidden letter only for you, because out of everyone in our family, you firmly possess a wild spirit exactly like my own. You have a beautiful fire inside you, an undeniable need to write beautiful words and tell meaningful stories. I have watched you struggle this past year, letting the harsh rejection of strangers slowly extinguish your beautiful, unique light." Clara hurriedly wiped a fresh stream of tears from her face, her vision blurring as she stared at the familiar handwriting. She took a deep breath and continued reading. "Many years ago, I too had an impossible dream. This hidden painting is all that physically remains of the brave artist I once wanted to be. I actively chose my family's survival over my own art, and while I have never regretted my final choice, I intimately know the bitter taste of an unfulfilled dream. I absolutely do not want you to ever taste that terrible bitterness, my sweet girl. You stopped writing because you were terrified of not being deemed good enough. You let the noisy world falsely tell you that your quiet words did not matter. Clara paused, the painful memories of cold rejection letters rushing back to her mind, burning her chest with the familiar shame she had secretly harbored for months. The letter gracefully continued. Inside the very bottom lining of this blue envelope, you will find something very important. I have lived a frugal life, Clara. Every single time I had a few spare dollars, I secretly hid them away. I did not save them for a rainy day or for house repairs. I saved every single penny specifically for you. Clara quickly peered deep inside the opening of the discarded blue envelope. Wedged deep within the bottom fold, she found a stiff, formal piece of bank paper. She pulled it out. It was a certified bank draft made out entirely in Clara's legal name. She gasped loudly when she finally registered the typed amount. It was a small fortune. It was more than enough money to comfortably pay her rent, buy groceries, and cover living expenses for 2 full, uninterrupted years. With this gift, the letter concluded, you finally have the absolute freedom to write. Do not ever settle for a mundane life that does not set your soul on fire. Use this precious time I am giving you. Write your magnificent stories, Clara. Fail 100 different times if you must, but never, ever stop trying to succeed. I willingly gave up my own art so that one day my own granddaughter would not ever have to give up hers. Open your heart to the possibilities of the world, just as you bravely opened the blue today. I will be proudly reading every single word you write from up in the stars. With all my endless, eternal love, Grandma Evelyn. Clara instantly collapsed back onto her knees, clutching the letter tightly to her chest, as deep, uncontrollable sobs completely tore through her entire body. They were absolutely not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming, life-changing gratitude. Her grandmother had secretly harbored the fierce soul of a lioness. She had truly seen Clara's hidden pain, understood her silent, creative despair, and miraculously reached out from beyond the grave to save her future. Mr. Abernathy placed a very gentle hand on Clara's shaking shoulder. She always knew you were meant for greatness, Clara. She just needed you to finally see it for yourself. When Sarah and Aunt Martha finally returned to the house later that afternoon, fully expecting to find Clara packing moving boxes, they instead found her sitting peacefully at the dining room table. The magnificent storm painting was proudly propped up against the wall. The certified bank draft and the beautiful letter sat squarely in the center of the wooden table. Clara watched quietly as her exhausted mother read the letter. Sarah's hands began to shake, and she pressed her fingers tightly to her lips to stifle a loud sob. Aunt Martha, the famously stoic woman who never showed vulnerability, openly wept as she gently traced the genius brushstrokes of the beautiful, stormy ocean. "We never even knew," Sarah whispered softly, thick tears streaming down her flushed face. "She never once said a single word about wanting to be an artist. She just quietly took care of all of us. She gave up her entire vibrant world just so that we could safely have ours," Aunt Martha added very quietly. She slowly looked around the faded parlor, suddenly seeing it not as a financial burden to be quickly sold, but as a sacred monument to a mother's ultimate, pure sacrifice. "We absolutely cannot sell this family house, Sarah. Not yet. Not ever. We deeply need to honor her memory right here." Clara stood up proudly and embraced her grieving family. "We won't ever sell it. I am going to stay right here. I am going to use some of the money Grandma left me to finally fix the leaking roof, paint the peeling walls, and bring vibrant life back into these old rooms. And I am going to sit outside on that front porch every single morning, rain or shine, and I am going to write my heart out. And that is exactly what Clara passionately did. The beautiful house did not go on the real estate market. It was quickly filled once again with the wonderful sounds of life, the loud clattering of a vintage typewriter permanently replacing the ticking of the old clock. Clara painted the heavy front door a vibrant shade of cerulean blue, a public tribute to the incredible grandmother who had saved her life. She wrote beautiful, sweeping stories of immense courage, of complicated family, and of the totally invisible sacrifices that good people make every day out of unselfish love. Her very first novel was triumphantly published just a year later, and she proudly dedicated it entirely to the brilliant artist who bravely painted a dark storm so her granddaughter could finally find the warm sun. And that, my dear friends, is exactly why a truly kind, selfless heart is worth infinitely more than all the shiny gold in the entire world. Sometimes, the wonderful people who love us the most can clearly see our vast potential, long before we can ever see it ourselves. They firmly believe in us when we have completely lost all hope, and their incredible love has the miraculous power to beautifully echo through the passage of time, long after they are physically gone from this earth. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Nanny Granny's Golden Tales for more timeless tales and endless wisdom. And tell me in the comments, what lesson did you learn from today's story?